Chapter 407. Fujio sat up straight before getting out of the car. Chin-mo had already noticed that the young man was extremely afraid of the cold, so when Fujio came out, he naturally reached out his hand and zipped up the young man's jacket. Fujio was wearing a mask. She lowered her eyes to look at the fingers that were tidying up her collar, and a faint smile could be seen at the corner of her eyes. In short, from Chen Xiaodong's point of view, his young master had never been so obedient. And Almighty Qin's eyes were lowered, and his black hair fell down. His side profile was so handsome that it was easy to have dirty thoughts. As if his young master was his possession. Chen Xiaodong shook his head, trying not to let his imagination run wild. Fujio didn't think much of it. The Almighty had always been considerate, so she always had the urge to raise an Almighty at home. Unfortunately, Fujio studied Qin-mo's face again and didn't know what to do. Is it nice to stare at me all the time? The Almighty's tone was very indifferent. His eyes were clearly looking at her collar, but he could even sense that she was up to no good. Fujio smiled. Yes, we are the super handsome team. I thought you would say the top student team. Chin-mo took back his left hand and put it in his pocket. He stood tall with his deep eyes and raised eyebrows, which was very demoralizing. Fujio. She couldn't let go of the title of top student. Change the topic. Let's go in for a cup of tea? Fujio rarely invited people. Chin-mo didn't agree. He was a little absent-minded. Nah, go to bed early. Okay, see you tomorrow. Fujio turned her head and glanced at her little butler. Chen Xiaodong quivered immediately and followed her. What made him look back was that Almighty Qin didn't leave immediately. Instead, he leaned against the Land Rover and seemed to be lighting a cigarette. His eyes seemed to be looking in their direction. Fujio sensed it too. She turned around and pointed at her mask at Chin-mo. Chin-mo raised his eyebrows. Fujio pointed at his right pocket. Chin-mo touched it, and his back trembled. The young man had left a mask for him when he wasn't paying attention. This guy. Chin-mo looked at the young man with bright eyes and white teeth in the distance, and the corner of his mouth slowly curled up. Then, in the fog, his eyes were cold and vicious, and a little deep. So, why would he give up such a good brother to someone else? After Fujio's figure disappeared into the night, Chin-mo got into the car. He took the mask out of his pocket and placed it in front of the steering wheel. At that time, the two of them didn't know that there would be such a storm in the unregulated official bar. The rumors against Fujio started in the wee hours of the morning. The Spade fans who didn't know right from wrong started to be led astray. Quite a number of them started to become fans of the road or anti-fans. Official bar was different from official Weibo. If such a thing had happened on the official Weibo account, Manager Feng would have received the news immediately. On the other side of the bar, it was an hour later that Agent Feng received the call. A large number of posts were discussing Spade Z's shortcomings. Some people even started to use Spade Z's name to create groups to trick fans, while the fans who really defended Spade Z were scolded as white lotuses. Some of them took the opportunity to gain popularity, while others felt wronged because of what they had done previously. All of a sudden, all of them rushed out to criticize Spade Z. But that was not the point. Chapter 408. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Feng Yi realized the seriousness of the situation. The country wasn't as open as overseas. In some aspects, many people still couldn't accept it. For example, if Chin-mo and Fujio were flirting with each other, it was okay, but if one of them really liked men, that group of fans was bound to be ostracized. Plus this time, the number of posts was too many. Everyone on the internet knew that there were people in the entertainment industry who specialized in raising anti-fans. These anti-fans would attack as long as they were hired. What made Feng Yi angry was who had done such a thing. There must be someone who could profit from this. The only positive measure he could do was to tell the Big V not to leave. But in the face of profit, some people didn't care. They would touch the edge of the topic if they could. 7 o'clock in the morning. The bad comments couldn't be controlled and exploded on the official Weibo. Some people from small teams started to stir the water. What was so disgusting? How could there be such a person who liked men? Someone even wrote, I won't disband Spade Z's fan group since there are people joining. In other words, she was going to continue to use Spade Z's popularity to deceive people. But some people didn't have good judgment and couldn't understand the situation. Some people with bad intentions argued that they didn't use Spade Z's popularity. But the evidence was clear. Their group was created in Spade Z's name and many people were tricked into joining. Since morning, Feng Yi's phone hadn't stopped ringing. All of them were asking him if the post was true. Was Spade Z really gay? Feng Yi didn't let the situation get any worse. But he was very clear that the situation wasn't going well. But what calmed him down was Qin Mo's call. What's going on? Qin Mo's voice was still very calm, but there was a layer of coldness hidden in it. After Feng Yi controlled the situation, he said, someone exposed the fact that little Spade used to chase a man in school, and some people criticized him for many things after he entered the Supreme Alliance. They want Supreme Alliance to have peace. Then tell them that Supreme Alliance belongs to the Qin group, not anyone else. Qin Mo's side profile was indifferent, but his ruthlessness was bone-chilling. Supreme Alliance will always have a place for Spade Z. We will live and die together. Feng Yi paused. Do we really have to be so tough? Qin Mo didn't say anything. Even through the phone, he could feel the coldness. Feng Yi understood what he meant. He cleared his throat with difficulty. I'll make a statement now. It's not just a statement. Qin Mo's eyes seemed to be overflowing with black fog. When his black trench coat was rolled up, he looked like his character in the game, the Grim Reaper. This time, drag out everyone involved. At the headquarters of the Jiang group, Jiang Zhua arched a brow. That's the reason you came over for tea so early in the morning? Yes. Qin Mo's gaze was cold. Where is he? Jiang Zhua sighed. You called me at 7 in the morning and I set it up for you. Chapter 409. On the Fu family's side, Chen Xiaodong wouldn't let Fu Jiu go to school no matter what. Smart as she was, Fu Jiu quickly sensed that something was wrong. She put her hand on Chen Xiaodong's shoulder. Tell me, what's the matter? No, I'm fine. Chen Xiaodong's eyes were still avoiding eye contact. He really didn't want his young master to hear those remarks. Fu Jiu curled up her lips. Is it about school? What can happen to the school? Chen Xiaodong didn't realize that he had been tricked. Fu Jiu said, that's the team's problem. Chen Xiaodong, give me the tablet. Fu Jiu stretched out her hand, looking very handsome. Chen Xiaodong hugged him tightly. You, Almighty Qin said you can't look at these electronic products. My eyes are fine now. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Give it to me. Chen Xiaodong shook his head. Fu Jiu smiled. You don't want to give it to me? You want me to molest you? Chen Xiaodong's eyes widened. How could young master do this? Even if he was good-looking, young master couldn't eat the grass by his side. Fu Jiu took advantage of this opportunity to take the tablet from Chen Xiaodong's arms. She previewed very quickly. It was almost 10 lines at a glance. Chen Xiaodong comforted Fu Jiu. Young master, don't take these words too seriously. What do these people know? I'm going to the internet cafe. Fu Jiu didn't wait for Chen Xiaodong to finish and threw the tablet back into his hands. Chen Xiaodong couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. And this time, Fu Jiu didn't go to Yin Wuyao's. Instead, she went to a smaller and closer restaurant. Not leaving a trace in the same place was her usual style of doing things. Even the Almighty didn't know about this. Boss, turn on a computer. This time, Fu Jiu didn't even reveal her face and hair color. She wore a black coat with a hood and just sat in the corner of the sofa. Fu Jiu didn't attack immediately. Instead, she opened Dazzle Dance as a cover. In other words, even if someone passed by behind her, they would only see that she was dazzling. He didn't know what else she had done besides Dazzle Dance. Fu Jiu put on her headphones and placed her hands on the porcelain white keyboard. Da-da-da. The crisp typing sound was like a rapid note, without the slightest pause. For ordinary people, many things might be difficult to distinguish on the internet. Because behind the layers of nicknames, you don't know who that person is. But to Fu Jiu, it was just an IP code. No matter how many times the other party changed their nicknames, they would be able to lock onto their true identity by hacking into their IP address. It was impossible to say that he was not affected. Even Fu Jiu understood why the Almighty was paying attention to her. She, who walked in the dark all year round, could not tolerate the darkness. There was no such thing as absolute white in this world. However, in the dead of night, she couldn't help but want to get it done once and for all. Like killing people. So, she was dangerous. Fu Jiu chuckled and thought of the man's side profile as he fixed her collar with his eyes lowered. You can't make mistakes, right? However, he couldn't let him off easily either. Causing trouble on the internet? Heh, don't you know whose territory this is? Fu Jiu held the lollipop in her mouth. You guys should thank the Almighty. If it wasn't for his beauty, all of you would have gone to hell to accompany the King of Hell. If Hoshino was here at this moment, he would definitely recognize Fu Jiu. On the screen, the white code kept jumping, and the eagle penetrated the firewall. Chapter 4:10. 9 o'clock. There was a lot of negative news on the official Weibo. Spade Z's departure from Supreme Alliance had become a hot topic. Some fans of other members also started to leave comments after being incited. Dada, you have to stay away from Spade Z, or else I won't be your fan anymore. Lin Feng, Yun Hu, Feng Shang, Yin Wu Yao, and even Shui Yaoyao's official Weibo all had similar comments. Shui Yaoyao's eyes turned red with anger when she saw those comments. She felt sorry for the young man. She had nothing in this group of people. But because she had nothing, she didn't care. There were no words but words. She posted a Weibo with the title, The Spade Z You Don't Understand. After clicking on the link, Shui Yaoyao's voice could be heard, very gentle and real. I was a very fat girl since I was young. I wasn't popular in school, and I was even ostracized. I was slandered as a thief. If it wasn't for a young man who appeared and told the public that justice might come late, but it would never be absent, I would still be carrying the crime of a thief for the rest of my life. I'm so glad that he appeared. When someone disliked me for being fat and didn't want to play with me, when everyone laughed at me, this young man used his gentle strength to take me to the esports selection contest, and completed the dream that I could never achieve in my life. I think that is the life I want. If Spade Z leaves Supreme Alliance, I will leave too, because my dream was given by him. Count me in. Feng Shang quickly followed, and when he reposted Shui Yaoyao's Weibo, he sent a very low voice. Actually, I'm very afraid to speak to everyone in this way. You guys should have heard it, I stutter. Because of this problem, there are many things that I don't dare to do until I met my idol. He said that stuttering is nothing, it's very cute. And he also likes to call me Baby Feng. If there are people who, because of my relationship with him, they won't be fans anymore, then so be it. Yin Wu Yao sat in front of the computer with a cigarette in his mouth. He was the least talkative. I came back because someone told me, so what if I'm old? I can still shock the esports world when I'm old. Since this person is going to be forced out, then I'll come back to be the boss of my internet cafe. The voices of the three of them really brought a lot of shock to the fans. Many people were asking if they were wrong. But how could the Kali team ask them to lower their voices at this time? He immediately sent a message using his alternate account. Supreme Alliance will not be threatened by you. You're just 3 rookies and you have so much to say. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that as soon as they said those words, Yun Hu and Lin Feng sent a voice message at the same time, using the same official Weibo. Yun Feng couple. F***CK your grandpa. They're obviously the Feng Yun couple. Lin Feng was still unconvinced. Chapter 4:11. We live and die together. Just how good was this team member to make all the team members say such words? Even at the expense of offending the fans. The Kali team was dumbfounded when they saw the situation. In their eyes, there were many things to consider, especially the feelings of the fans. But how dare the other side go this far? They had indeed miscalculated. How could the Supreme Alliance be an ordinary team that would not stick to their morals just because they were afraid of offending the fans? Funny. It wasn't easy for them to be standing here. Because it wasn't easy, they had a bottom line. As Yun Hu said, if a team couldn't even be grateful, then the team was finished. Mountains and rivers. The National League. They must go together. No one missing. Because of this voice message, the wind on the internet began to change. People's hearts were made of flesh. Even if they couldn't see right from wrong, they would still be moved by the Supreme Alliance's behavior. The members of the Cali team threw the mouse and were still indignant. Damn it, that Spade Z was almost killed. Should we post another thread? Just as the other person was about to speak, a voice suddenly rang out. No one knew what happened to the internet celebrities in the industry. But at the same time, they posted on Weibo. The title of the Weibo was the same: "Come and see what the Cali team's alternate accounts have done." Almost instantly, this Weibo post was reposted like crazy. How could they not repost it? The same IP was divided into many accounts. First, they pretended to be Spade fans and posted on the official forum. After that, they changed to another account and complained that their posts were deleted. Even the fake Spade fan group was created by them. Why did everyone know so clearly? Because the publisher was very considerate. When posting the pictures, he marked everyone with the same IP address with a red arrow. The most shocking thing was that there was a voice message on it. The content of the voice message was, "Damn it, that Spade Z was so close to dying. Should we post again?" It was a clear conversation, and even the voice could be heard. It wasn't like the Cali team hadn't broadcast before. Even if their fans wanted to speak up for them, they didn't have the face to say anything. He had been caught red-handed. The two members of the Cali team didn't know that their computers had been hacked. They didn't know about this Weibo post until someone commented on them. The moment they heard the voice message, their faces turned pale. "Who is it? Who recorded my voice?" One of them subconsciously shouted. But when she looked back, everyone here was their content staff. How could they possibly harm themselves? Then how did this voice recording get released? At this time, in an internet cafe street on West Street, the black-masked youth's fingers flew across the keyboard, and several computers around her entered a state of attack. Even the owner of the internet cafe didn't know when his machines had been charged and started operating. How strange! As his voice fell, Fujio put on the hood of her coat and stood up from the chair. Chapter 4:12. F***CK. The owner of the internet cafe didn't know what was going on. He kept hitting the computer mainframe. Fujio had already walked out of the alley. The trend on the internet had completely changed. But the Cali team was shameless to the extreme. They didn't want to admit it even after being exposed. Maybe they were confident that they wouldn't be responsible for what they said on the internet. But was it true? Not necessarily. Don't treat everyone as fools. Some people were indeed confused. But that was only a very small number of people who had bad values. Under the trend, everyone asked the Cali team to come out and apologize. They used my Big Spade's name to build a fan group. They said they were supporting me, but they were actually slandering me. Who gave you the right to be so arrogant? One person with multiple accounts just to make my Big Spade leave the Supreme Alliance. What a good scheme. Such a team doesn't have the qualifications to participate in the national competition. What a sharp contrast. Look at the Supreme Alliance and then look at you. You are all esports players. Can't you just play games? Why do you have to harm others? Upstairs, you don't understand. First, they used Spade to attract fans, and then they drove Spade away. In the end, they were the ones who benefited. I saw the screenshot and listened to the recording. How despicable. I only have one word for the Cali team. Get out. The girls who refused to admit it didn't even dare to turn on their computers after being bombarded with comments. What's wrong with this group of people? I also saw that they are not Spade Z's fans. Does this have anything to do with them? Only an idiot would ask such a question. Perhaps the Cali team would never understand it. Anything that touched the bottom line, people would always stand on the side of justice. It didn't need anyone to organize it, and it didn't need to be anyone's fan. It was human nature. Who didn't have a passionate heart? Except for Lioli and the others. Captain, what should we do now? If this goes on, my live broadcast tomorrow will be terrible. Things had come to this point, and there were still people thinking about her live broadcast. Lioli's eyes were gloomy. After all, she had always been the queen of otaku. She had never been scolded like this. It was all because of Spade Z. That recording. How did it come out? Thinking of this, Azure threw the mouse heavily. A loud bang was heard. The whole club fell silent. The members didn't dare to speak. Lioli took a deep breath, fiddled with her long hair, and said, Apologize. Apologize? How could he apologize for such a thing? Once they apologized, they wouldn't be able to compete anymore, right? Lioli looked at the faces of the whole team and said slowly, "Now that things have happened, someone has to take responsibility. Since we accidentally said something wrong and were caught red-handed, we should apologize publicly for the sake of the Cali team." At this moment, the entire team finally understood what their captain meant. What Lioli meant was that whoever released the recording on Weibo should apologize. In other words, they had to sacrifice the two of them for the benefit of the entire team? The two girls who hated Fujio so much just now were stunned. They couldn't believe their ears. "Captain, you were the one who said we could." Chapter 4:13. Then, she glanced at the whole team. "I think everyone has the same idea as me. After all, the National League is coming. Or do you want all of us to leave with you?" "That's impossible." "Yes, impossible." Someone walked over and said, "Go and apologize if you're so careless." "That's right. Don't drag us down. We still have to compete." The two girls really couldn't describe their feelings at this time. They never thought that their team members would use the method they used on Spade Z to deal with them. It was obvious that everyone had done this together. Why did they say that they were dragging everyone down? Just because their voices were recorded? You. I won't apologize. One of the girls shouted, "If you want to apologize, everyone should apologize together." Lioli stood at the side, her face expressionless. "That's not up to you. Turn on the computer. The accounts should be automatically logged in." At this moment, the two girls realized that they had to do it. Because, from the moment the accident happened, not only their captain, but also their teammates who were good friends had decided to make them the scapegoats to take the whole thing. That's right, how could they have forgotten? Not all teams were like Supreme Alliance, able to live and die together. Lioli had a good plan. After the two team members released the news, she went on Shangguan Weibo. Only then did she go on Shangguan Weibo. The statement read, "There is a problem with the Cali battle team. As the captain, I also have some responsibility. I didn't realize in time that there would be such people around me. Now, I have removed the problematic members from the Cali battle team. I have also set up evidence." It had to be said that Lioli's move was beautiful. Because soon, there would be people comforting her. Even some of Spade Z's fans felt that she didn't have any responsibility for this. This attitude was very good. But was it really like this? Obviously not. But Lioli still missed one point. Yun, who had already said in the message that Almighty Qin was busy with other things. Since he had decided to make a move, of course, he wouldn't let it go. It was almost 10 o'clock. In a Starbucks coffee shop in a shopping mall. A person was still looking down at his phone and computer. He seemed to specialize in this industry. The Weibo page was still open on the screen. However, his mind wasn't on that at the moment. The direction of the internet had already begun to change. No matter how hard he tried to pull it back, it would be difficult. It was all that Shui Yaoyao's fault. When she wrote that paragraph, many people would resonate with her. That would be wasting the best opportunity to attack. However, what puzzled him the most was the message that he had posted on his Weibo. He had been paid to spread Spade Z's information. Why would they post something about the Cali squad? During those 5 minutes, he couldn't log into his account no matter how hard he tried. It was the same for his friends. All of them showed abnormalities. What was going on? Even if he wanted to help the Cali team, he could not. That was his boss. However, his boss was pretty good. Especially Captain Lu Li, who knew how to speak. Pushing two people out to appease the anger of the masses was the right thing to do. Looking at the storm on the official Weibo account that had basically subsided, the man picked up the phone and glanced at it. Strange, why isn't the big client here yet? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a swoosh. The chair in front of him was pulled out. Chapter 4:14. The moment the man looked up, he wanted to run. But how could Qin Mo let him run? Almost as soon as he stood up, someone pressed his back. Sit down. It was the Qin family's bodyguards. These people were all from the army. Even though they were wearing black coats, young master's identity was too special. Not only because he was the only son of the Qin family, but also because young master couldn't be hurt. This was a top-secret order from the inside. And the man didn't know about this. But even so, deep in his heart, he was still afraid of the man in front of him. Qin Mo looked much more elegant. He sat there with his long legs crossed. He took off his black gloves and said with a light smile, "Who gave you the courage to go against Supreme Alliance in Spade Z?" "Ha! Young Master Qin, this is a misunderstanding. It must be a misunderstanding. How would I dare to go against Supreme Alliance?" Of course, the man wanted to deny it. Qin Mo tilted his head and smiled. Misunderstanding? Then let's talk about the law. Article 246 of our country's criminal law states that anyone who publicly insults others or fabricates facts to slander others, even on the internet, will be sentenced to up to 3 years in prison if the circumstances are serious. Hearing the famous young Master Qin recite a law without missing a word, that person felt a chill run down his spine. Qin Mo casually added, "Do you want to go to jail?" "I really didn't." The man still refused to admit it. Qin Mo played with his silver lighter in his hand and glanced at the bodyguard with a light smile. The bodyguard raised his hand and punched the man in the stomach. The man's whole body curled up in pain. Qin Mo was still like a rich young master drinking coffee. Using Spade Z's popularity to create a group to attract fans. Internet fraud carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison. How long do you think you will stay in prison if you are charged with all these crimes? The man subconsciously refuted, "I didn't create the group. They asked if I could do something, Just as he said this, the man realized that he had fallen into young Master Qin's trap. Qin Mo lowered his eyes, and even the corner of his mouth was cold. Kali team. The man was really scared because he had never seen young Master Qin like this. He was so scared that even his voice was trembling. Yes, it's them, but now someone has come out to apologize. Finding 2 scapegoats is an apology? Qin Mo was just sitting there, but the pressure was strong. "It seems like you don't know me well enough." The moment he finished speaking, the bodyguard immediately understood and punched the man's stomach again. The man was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. He begged, "Young Master Qin, I'll tell you everything. I was just paid to do things for them." The real mastermind was Lioli, the captain of the Kali battle team. If he continued to fight like this, he would be beaten to death. Qin Mo glanced sideways and listened to the man's words. His eyes darkened, but his voice was calm. "In your line of work, there should be records of transactions." That person hadn't expected Qin Mo to be able to guess this. His eyes were filled with panic. Qin Mo arched a brow, his lips cold. That person was afraid that young Master Qin would make another move, so he hurriedly took out his phone. "I'll send a screenshot of the transaction." On the other side, Luli looked at the comforting comments under the official Weibo account, and the corners of her mouth curled up. Chapter 4:15. That was a chat record between her and an internet hacker. It was clearly written that she wanted to hire him to deal with Spade Z, and there was also the payment amount. Lioli never thought that the person she had worked with for more than half a year would keep this kind of thing and post it on the internet. The moment she saw that screenshot, Lioli felt that it was over. She was really over. Even a few people who had no sense of right and wrong were comforting her. However, they were no match for more righteous people. This had angered the public. Even the National League's organizing committee made a statement. In response to the fact that some teams used bad means to slander others, the organizing committee has decided to disqualify all members of the Kali team. Esports is supposed to be a place where strength speaks, not these shameful thoughts. Disqualify all members. That meant that even if they were no longer in the Kali team and went to other places, they could no longer participate. At this moment, the club was completely silent. Everyone slumped down in their seats, their faces pale. Especially Lioli. She was so angry that her first reaction was to call that person. "Hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Don't you have any professional ethics, F? I'm Qin Mo," just 4 words, and Lioli's voice was stuck in her throat. Almighty Qin. How could it be him? Lioli's face was drained of all color in an instant. There was no situation more embarrassing than this. Everything she did was for this man. But now it was also this man who dealt with her. And he knew all her dirty side. Lioli almost felt that the man did it on purpose, purposely picking up her call. Listen, this is just the beginning. China Mo wouldn't talk to this kind of woman. He hung up the phone and threw it back on the wooden table. That person smiled fawningly. Young Master Qin, look, I told you it was all because of her. China Mo glanced at him. Arrest him and take him to the police station. Young Master Qin. That person's eyes were wide open, and he still wanted to struggle. China Mo had already stood up and walked out. Jiang Zhuo was standing outside. When he saw China Mo walk over, he extinguished his cigarette. Even though he knew it wasn't the right time to ask, he couldn't help but ask, "Don't you think you're too nice to Fujio? He's my younger brother. Who else would I be good to if not my younger brother?" China Mo turned his head and looked at his good friend with a deep gaze. Jiang Zhuo's expression turned serious. "You know I'm not talking about that kind of good." China Mo paused, looking deeply into Jiang Zhuo's eyes. "That won't happen. We will only be brothers." "That's good." Jiang Zhuo looked much more relaxed. As long as China Mo could confirm that his position in the relationship wasn't wrong, everything would be fine. After all, it wasn't easy to take detours. But it was very strange. Why didn't the main character appear today? It wasn't that Fujio didn't show up, but she showed up at the most suitable place for her to appear. Fu's company. The top floor was where the shareholders' meeting was held. Today, the Fu's enterprise was bustling with activity. In Su Mei's words, everyone present was the boss of the Fu's enterprise and had the right to decide the future of the Fu's enterprise. Chapter 4:16. As we all know, the Fu Corporation is in desperate need of fresh blood to improve its brand. Su Mei was dressed in professional attire, looking very elegant. The esports industry, including the peripherals of the esports industry and online live streaming, all of these are immeasurable profits. It's a pity that our generation is old. Even if we have the advantage in making decisions, we still don't understand what the users really want. That's why I asked old Fu to hold this shareholders' meeting. If Ximing takes over the Fu Corporation's new industry, I believe he will guide the Fu Corporation in the right direction. After the shareholders heard this, they all expressed their agreement. Young Master Fu is indeed capable. Many people like him playing games. He has already joined a team from another province and will appear in the National League. This way, he will bring a lot of popularity to the Fu Corporation. The sooner the company has a general manager, the older people like us can relax. 3 of the shareholders were related to Su Mei, and one of them was Su Mei's younger brother. Of course they would agree. There were also a few small shareholders who didn't care. They just needed to wait for the dividends. After all, in their eyes, the Fu Corporation would belong to Fu Ximing sooner or later. Even if He Honghua had shares, it was useless. She couldn't do anything with only 25% of the shares. Fu Zhongyi was different. He had 45% of the shares and Su Mei's younger brother had 15%. It was obvious who the Fu Corporation belonged to. But there were still 2 old antiques who didn't agree with this. They had come together with He Honghua and Fu Zhongyi. They knew that if He Honghua hadn't sold all her assets, the Fu Corporation wouldn't have existed. Fu Zhongyi was ungrateful, but they didn't forget. I don't agree. The Fu Corporation is different from before. We have to consider all aspects. Who is on the Fu family tree and who should be the manager of the Fu Corporation? It will sound good if others hear about it. Su Mei had already expected these 2 stubborn old men to say that. She first glanced at He Honghua and said, "You 2 are right. However, if Sister Honghua's son could make a name for himself, I wouldn't let Ximing come to the company." Now, there was a rumor going around on the internet. How could a boy chase after another man? He did join the Supreme Alliance, but I'm guessing that after today, Jiu will be kicked out. So how can he be the manager of the Fu Corporation with such an immoral image? Before He Honghua came, she had been prepared to let Su Mei humiliate her. She was also very clear that things were not the same as they were in the past. Since the secretary was the mistress, she would not have the right to speak at the shareholders' meeting. It was a very straightforward reason because her shares couldn't compare to Fu Zhongyi's. As for Fu Zhongyi, He Honghua had long given up on such a man. But she knew better than anyone how obedient her Jiu was. She couldn't stand anyone splashing dirty water on her child. This was a mother's nature. Who are you calling immoral? He Honghua's round body stood up and she smiled coldly. You are a mistress. Do you have the face to talk about others? Su Mei immediately shrank back. He Honghua clearly didn't do anything to her, but it was as if she had been hit by He Honghua. Fu Zhongyi couldn't bear to let her go. He stood in front of Su Mei. Chapter 4:17. She was chasing He Honghua away. The shareholders all understood what he meant, and they all looked over. He Honghua glared at her. How dare you? Sister Honghua, I call you sister because I respect you. But if you don't want this respect, I can only ask the security guards to escort you out. Su Mei was pitiful. How can the shareholders' meeting be held if you yell at me like this? This is the company, not the countryside. If I don't ask you out, we can't continue. He Honghua was so angry that her chest hurt. I still have shares in the Fu family. Why can't I sit here? Yes, we all know you have shares. Su Mei pretended to be very reasonable. That's why I invited you to this shareholders' meeting. I've asked you many times to return the shares to Zhongyi. It's fine for us to buy them, but you always disagreed. Now that there are personnel decisions in the company, of course the major shareholders have the final say. The 25% shares are the tens of thousands of yuan that you took out when the company was first established. Sister Honghua, you can't always think that you can do whatever you want just because of a few tens of thousands of yuan. That won't do. All the old people who followed Fu Zhongyi knew that without the tens of thousands of yuan, the Fu family would be dead. But now, even this became Su Mei's topic of ridicule for He Honghua. No one could understand He Honghua's feelings. That kind of infuriating and sad pain made her breath tremble. The two shareholders couldn't stand it and wanted to say something. But Fu Zhongyi coughed coldly. This made them realize that it was no longer possible for Fu Zhongyi to remember their past kindness. Not only He Honghua, but even they seemed to have lost the right to speak. Su Mei was still talking. She raised her eyebrows and looked at He Honghua. The company really doesn't need you to create trouble. What are you waiting for, security guards? Ask her out. We have to continue the meeting. Yes. The two security guards rushed forward and grabbed He Honghua's arms. He Honghua's eyes were red. You are just a secretary. What right do you have to do this? And you, look carefully, I am the shareholder. The security guards had been here for a long time and they knew who was in charge of the company. They didn't even listen to He Honghua's words as they dragged her out. Just at this moment. Swoosh. Something rang out behind him. Subconsciously, they turned their heads back, and their calves were hit hard by the skateboard. It was so painful that the security guards almost immediately let go with a scream. He pulled the skateboard back. He returned to Fu Jiu's feet. She stood in front of the door, dressed in black. Her hair was like silver, and her eyes were filled with hostility. However, her voice was very calm. Who allowed you to touch my mother? 9. He Honghua was stunned. Everyone in the meeting room stood up because of this scene. Even Fu Ximing, who had been hiding in the small partition, couldn't help but rush out and look at Fu Jiu with disgust. Fu Zhongyi was even angrier. He didn't leave any face for Fu Jiu and blasted. You wastrel, how dare you show up? Look at all the shameful things you've done. Chasing a man all over the school? All of you scram. Take your mother with you. Chapter 4:18. Su Mei knew how to behave. She quickly grabbed Fu Zhongyi's arm and tried to calm him down. She said to Fu Jiu, your dad's health has always been poor, and you're still so mad at him. Everyone here is your elder. It's fine if you're rude, but you even brought a skateboard here to hurt people. This is not a place you should be. Auntie advises you to leave. Otherwise, it won't be good for you and your mom. Hearing that, Fu Jiu tilted her head and smiled. She stood in front of He Honghua and put one hand in her pocket. She looked down at Su Mei. Since you're a secretary, you should just stand there and do your job. This is a conversation between the Fu family. It has nothing to do with you. You. Su Mei narrowed her eyes. Fu Jiu, how come you've become like your mother? You don't care about the occasion. I'll say it again, this is a shareholders' meeting. You? Fujio interrupted her before she could finish. She was playing with a USB in her hand, and her voice was very calm. It is precisely because this is a shareholders' meeting that I am warning you to do your job as a secretary. Otherwise, get out of here. You unfilial son. Fu Zhongyi heard Fujio's words and became even more ruthless. Call security. Call all the security guards downstairs. Do you think this is a place where you can cause trouble? Su Mei's face turned cold, and her eyes were filled with coldness. No one had ever told her to get out of here. This peasant bun, if she didn't teach him a lesson for a few days, he would forget who he was. He deserved to be kicked out. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. How could the smart Fujio not see through Su Mei's thoughts? But she acted as if she didn't see or hear Fu Zhongyi's words. She walked over to the long table in the conference room. Then she reached out and knocked on the back of one of the chairs. That person was none other than Su Mei's younger brother. Su Xing, what do you want? Fujio, what the hell do you want? Fu Ximing's arrogant little face was full of venom after seeing his actions. In contrast, Fujio's expression was much more indifferent. I want to ask your uncle why he has the right to sit here. Fujio. Su Mei said again, Su Xing is one of the shareholders of Fu's enterprise. You should call him Boss Su when you see him. You shouldn't talk to him like this. Yeah, how can you talk to President Su like that? That is to say, this Fujio really followed He Honghua in death. No matter what. He was born in the countryside. Even if he is rich now, he can't change his bad habits. Luckily, Ximing is in the Fu's enterprise. The two shareholders looked at Fujio with disapproval. They didn't have many shares in their hands, but they always defended the Su family. Su Xing also sneered, That's enough, Mr. He. Hurry up and leave with your brainless son. We don't want to always be a joke. Every time the shareholders' meeting was held, He Honghua would receive all kinds of ridicule. She would always clench her fists and tell herself that she had to endure for Jiu's sake. But now, Jiu was standing in front of her, that group of people. He Honghua couldn't stay any longer, not because she couldn't stand it, but because she was afraid that Jiu would be wronged. But just as she was about to reach out her hand. Chapter 419. The youth's voice was neither loud nor soft, and it had a unique magnetism to it. It was very nice, and it didn't sound like the country bumpkin Fujio's voice at all. But it was just one sentence. This caused Su Xing's entire body to tremble, and even his expression to change. He, who was originally stained with the smell of alcohol, now looked a little shaky. Where was his previous steady appearance? Fujio laughed, but her eyes were cold. It seems that CEO Su has remembered. You. Impossible, it can't be you. Su Xing's lips were pale. Su Mei immediately felt that something was wrong. What do you mean it can't be him? Ah Xing, what's going on? No. Nothing happened. Su Xing's gaze was evasive. Fujio slowly pulled out the leather chair and sat in his previous seat. She looked at Su Mei and said 6 words handsomely. That's it. That was a seat that only shareholders were qualified to sit in. It couldn't be what she thought. How could this be? Ah Xing, say something. Su Mei couldn't hold it in any longer. Su Xing stuttered and didn't dare to look at her sister. Finally, she pointed at Fujio angrily. You did it on purpose. You set me up, didn't you? Otherwise, how could I have lost so much that day? In the end, when he lost, he impulsively mortgaged his shares, just to get his money back. He wanted to mortgage it first and then redeem it, but he didn't expect that the other party wouldn't return the shares to him. Su Xing thought that the other party was dissatisfied with the price, so he planned to negotiate again today. How did this kid become the shareholder? Fujio crossed her long legs, looking vaguely like a CEO. Boss Su, that's too much. Did I hold a gun and force you to gamble? You are the one who did not take the shares of Fu's enterprise seriously and mortgage them as you please. After all, your shares are different from my mother's. When President Fu established the Fu Corporation, 90% of the money was provided by my mother. Later, when the Fu Corporation was robbed, my mother took out her remaining money to finance the company and became one of the shareholders. At that time, the Fu Corporation was not worth much, and even if it was rotting on the street, no one would know. My mother was obviously trying to save people. At that time, there were two uncles who fought together with her. These people's shares were obtained with blood and hardship, so they cherished it even more. Even if one day they couldn't continue living because of a mistress, they wouldn't think of selling their shares. President Su's shares are different. Just because he has a third sister who is good at pillow talk, he obtained 15% of the Fu Corporation's shares. Of course he can mortgage something that he obtained so easily. You. Su Xing was so angry that his face turned red. Fu Zhongyi and Hisumei's faces darkened. Fu Jiu's words tore the faces of the three of them apart, both inside and outside. The two elders of the Fu Corporation never thought that Fu Jiu would mention this. Sometimes in the business world, he had to abandon many principles. But in the end, they were different from Fu Zhongyi. Only after suffering would they understand that it was not easy. Only by living up to the people of the past could they live with a clear conscience. Now that the young man mentioned it, those days seemed to come back to them. Back then they fought side by side. He Honghua was uncultured, but she had great foresight and strategy. Some people even admired her decisiveness and honesty. But later, Su Mei got involved. That woman was good at acting, pretending to be pitiful, and ruined He Honghua's reputation. Chapter 420. But who said that a village girl was destined to be incapable? Capability could never be determined by education or family background. At that time, they were so focused on their work that they didn't notice it. By the time they realized it, it was already too late. Fu Zhongyi was determined to protect Su Mei. As small shareholders, they couldn't say anything. They thought the result this time would be the same as the previous years. But what they didn't expect was that there would be such a twist. In fact, even He Honghua herself was stunned. Jiu, you asked me for money 2 days ago to buy shares? Yes. Fu Jiu chuckled. I bought it for you as a birthday present. What do you think, Mom? Are you satisfied with this birthday present? Of course, Fu Jiu wouldn't tell He Honghua that targeting Su Xing was a plan she had ever since she got her computer out of the hospital. But she had to wait for the right time. And the day she came back from Tokyo was the perfect time. Gamblers couldn't quit gambling for the rest of their lives. She and the Almighty used all the money they earned from clearing games to set up this trap. The Su family members who bullied He Honghua. How could she let them be free and unfettered? It was just that every mature hacker would leave no trace when they killed someone. Fu Jiu was the same. Her plan was meticulous. Every word she typed was a trap. That was her. Even Interpol couldn't do anything about it. Hacker Z. He Honghua looked at the youngster in front of her, and her eyes turned red. Birthday present? So this was how it was given. She was Jiu, really? Mom likes it very much. He Honghua sniffled, and her cheeks were puffed up. Fu Jiu shook her finger. It can't be just this. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and turned He Honghua's body to face Su Mei, who was standing opposite them. She raised her eyebrows handsomely and said, Mom, come on, let's play something more fun. Didn't the mistress just kick you out? Now use your status as a 40% shareholder to make her scram. Su Mei's face turned pale instantly. She clenched her fists. Fu Jiu, your mom doesn't have this right. She does. Fu Jiu's voice was calm. 40% shares is enough to kick a secretary like you out. Or do you want security to kick you out? Su Mei bit her lips tightly, as if this was the only way she could control her emotions, which were on the verge of losing control. She couldn't just go out like this. There were more than 100 employees in the Fu Corporation. If she left like this, how could she continue to stay in the Fu Corporation? Su Mei had no choice but to look at Fu Zhongyi with tears in her eyes. Fu Zhongyi's heart ached. He turned to Fu Jiu and said, Who dares to touch the security guards? So what if I have 40% of the shares? Su Mei is my secretary, and I am the chairman. It's not just 40%. At this moment, the two old men who had been wanting to talk stood up and walked behind Fu Jiu. And 5% of our total. In that instant, even Fu Zhongyi's expression changed. You guys. Loyalty. One mustn't forget one's roots. Those were the exact words of one of them. But Fu Zhongyi didn't listen. He felt like he had been betrayed, and he looked at Fu Jiu in exasperation. You've really grown up. If I knew that I would raise an ingrate like you, I might as well feed my money to the dogs. Zhongyi, don't be angry. Sume was still pretending. Chapter 421. Boss Fu, you should keep your words to yourself. If my mom had known that she would raise an ingrate like you, forgetting about home after having a mistress, she wouldn't have taken out all her savings to let you start this company. President Fu, you're getting on in your years, and you've forgotten all about your past kindness. But it doesn't matter. You'll soon find out that not only can I kick your mistress out of the company, but I can also help my mother take back the company. Otherwise, how can I be worthy of you calling me an unfilial son? Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever, as calm as the clouds. Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever. You. Fu Zhongyi covered his chest with his hands, feeling all the blood rushing to his face. Fu Jiu wasn't worried about this scumbag. She put her fingers on He Honghua's shoulder again and smiled devilishly. Come on, Mom, let's continue playing the game. I don't need you. I'll leave by myself. Sume knew that she had to leave even if she didn't want to. Her fingers were almost numb from her pinching, but there was nothing she could do. It was better to leave by herself than to be forced out by the security guards. But she didn't expect that she would be the one to be kicked out instead of He Honghua. This was a humiliation that Sume had never experienced before. However, the young man didn't seem to want to stop. Secretary Su, how can you leave by yourself? Take your son and brother with you. We're having a shareholders' meeting, not a family banquet. Fu Shiming was about to explode when he heard this. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Fu Jiu was still smiling, but she gave off an icy aura. As a shareholder, I'm warning you to leave immediately. Fu Shiming still wanted to say more. Fu Jiu didn't waste time. She pressed the phone on the conference table. Security, come in. Seeing this, Sume had to pull Fu Shiming over. Mom, look at his arrogant face. I'm not leaving. Why should we leave? Shut up. Sume growled. She looked at her baby son, took a deep breath, and said in a low voice, If you don't leave, do you want the security guards to kick you out? You're the second young master of the Fu family. Even if you're kicked out, you have to walk out by yourself, understand? Fu Shiming clenched his fingers. I can't take this lying down. Not to mention Fu Shiming. How could Sume just swallow it? But couldn't she swallow it? This was a shareholders' meeting. Fu Jiu was a shareholder. Sume used to rely on this advantage, but she didn't expect that she would suffer a loss because of this. Because the commotion was too loud, and the door of the conference room was open, when the Su family's mother and son walked out, many employees looked in their direction, intentionally or unintentionally. That kind of gaze made Sume feel a burning pain on her face. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. This time, Su Shi and her son's arrogance was completely gone. Not only that, since the Fu family was involved in esports, there would definitely be some Spade fans. After seeing the young man, they were already very excited. Hearing the youngster's words just now, a few of them seemed to have been injected with adrenaline, leaving dozens of comments online. You guys should really get to know this big Spade. He's not only righteous, but also filial. He's a prince who protects his mother. At this moment, in the conference room. Chapter 422. How could Fu Zhongyi attend the next meeting? It was already good enough that he didn't need to take the pill. He was so angry that he was trembling. But Fu Zhongyi was a man who had gone through thick and thin. Soon, his eyes darkened and he looked at Fu Jiu. He didn't look like he was looking at his own child, but more like he was looking at his enemy, wishing he could cut off her flesh and remove her bones. Needless to say, the contents of the meeting were obvious. Even though Fu Zhongyi had the most shares, there were still a few small shareholders on his side. But the appointment of personnel in the company was no longer up to him. In the past, Fu Zhongyi had allowed Sume to kick He Honghua out of the company, leaving her with only the shares and not allowing her to show her face in the company. This was to completely remove He Honghua. But now, Fu Jiu was returning the favor. The illegitimate son wanted to be the general manager? As a shareholder, not only would she not agree, but she would also ban the illegitimate son's mother from the company. From that day onwards, The decision-making power of the Fu Corporation was no longer concentrated in Fu Zhongyi's hands. Everyone in the Fu Corporation knew that the huge change in the ownership of the Fu Corporation 10 years ago would probably happen again in another 10 years. The nouveau riche that they used to look down on actually made such a move. The two shareholders who had always supported the Su family didn't expect this. So when the meeting ended, they looked at Fu Jiu with unfriendly eyes. But Fu Jiu just stood there, dressed in black with silver hair. For some reason, she exuded a noble aura. This was simply the welfare of female employees. Did you see that? That's our young master from the Supreme Alliance. I heard he's really good. He's not just good. He's the FC King in Zone C. He's skilled and has a good character. The person who said this was definitely a fan of Spade Eye. Of course, there were still many people who didn't play games. But even so, looking at the youngster's demeanor and the way he held the skateboard, he was so handsome that they became his fangirl in a matter of minutes. Someone said, "This person has changed a lot. He wasn't like this before." You guys were too far away and didn't hear it. Who knows who will be in charge of the Fu Corporation in the future? The employees couldn't be blamed for talking. After all, who would have thought that the youngster's side would play such a good card for such a big change? Just like that, He Honghua was still a little confused when she got into the car. But she also realized that her Jiu had changed a lot. It was a good thing that the child had become more mature, but... Jiu, tell me honestly, how many things are you hiding from me? He Honghua turned her head, her round face very serious. Fu Jiu's fingers paused, and she chuckled. Mom, why would I hide anything from you? Then why did you? He Honghua hadn't finished. Fu Jiu turned around and placed the skateboard in the back of the car. Brother Mo taught me. Almighty, I can only borrow it from you. Qin Mo. He Honghua's eyes widened. Him. Jiu, she said. Hua. He. He Jiu, she said. Fu to say. Hua she. And Hua. She is to say to was. And but. She had thought. He Honghua thought it made sense, but she immediately retorted. My Jiu isn't stupid. Yes, she isn't. Fu Jiu replied. She took out her phone and sent a message. The message was about transferring money to the casino where the boss of the Su family went. Chapter 423. Fu Jiu replied. Huh. It was obvious that she hadn't come back to her senses. He Honghua repeated, I say, Qin Mo is really nice to you. Fu Jiu smiled and took back her phone. She said naturally, he's my brother so it's natural for him to be nice to me. Yeah. He Honghua was an honest person, and she did whatever her Jiu said. Then let's invite Qin Mo to our house for dinner. We should thank him properly, or we wouldn't have such a good time. Ha ha ha. He Honghua laughed heartily, just like herself. Fu Jiu said, no need, I just treated him to a skewer 2 days ago. What if the Almighty's clothes burst when we invited him home? Fu Jiu didn't want He Honghua to know that the Fu Jiu of the past was gone. She was afraid that the other party would be sad. But Fu Jiu also knew that the closer someone was to her, the more they would notice that she was different. So the Almighty couldn't come. But this time, He Honghua didn't listen to her Jiu. Child, how can your treat be the same as mine? Invite him over for a meal. Qin Mo is good-looking and sensible. I like him. Jojo didn't know what to say. Fu Jiu had to praise her mom for having good taste. She also thought that the Almighty was good-looking and sensible, so she wanted to raise him. But it was too dangerous to raise him by force. Mom, Brother Mo is so busy with work, and he might not have time. Fu Jiu wanted He Honghua to give up on this idea. He Honghua nodded. That's right. Then call him first. I'll prepare when I have time, and if not, we can always invite him later. Okay. Fu Jiu thought that she had finally gotten around it. But He Honghua still didn't drive and looked at her. Call him. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Now. Of course, He Honghua ordered. Fu Jiu couldn't be too obvious, so she dialed the Almighty's number. She thought that she would hang up immediately after 3 rings. Anyway, she had to make a WeChat appointment to call the Almighty, so the chances of the call going through weren't high. But who would have thought that as soon as she had this thought, A deep and pleasant voice came from the other end. Hello. This. He picked up after one ring. Fu Jiu glanced at He Honghua and saw that her eyes were shining. She said helplessly, Brother Mo, it's me. I know it's you. Qin Mo is sitting in the front passenger seat while Jiangzhua is driving. Jiangzhua didn't know whose phone call was so charming that it made the person beside him chuckle. Auntie is treating us? Qin Mo glanced at his watch. When is it? Fu Jiu quickly said, It's 6 o'clock today. If you are busy, we can do it another day. Judging from the Almighty's tone, he must be busy. Not bad, let's avoid it like this. Qin Mo held onto his phone, his lips curved into a playful smile. You don't seem too willing for me to go. When Fu Jiu heard this, He Honghua's face happened to lean over. Hearing this, she looked at her own child with a very disapproving gaze. Fu Jiu was unmoved. She chuckled and said, Brother Mo, why wouldn't I want you to come? I miss you so much even though I haven't seen you for a day. Why was the Almighty so smart? As though he could hear the youngster's inner thoughts, the smile on Qin Mo's lips deepened. His voice was faint. In that case, I'll cancel the dinner tonight. After all, you want me to go. Fu Jiu. Chapter 424. Jiangzhua saw Qin Mo hang up the phone, turned the steering wheel, and raised his eyebrows. Who was it that made you so happy? Fu Jiu. Qin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. You guys have dinner. I'm going to the Fu family. Jiangzhua agreed. He temporarily believed that Qin Mo didn't have any feelings for young Master Fu. After all, based on his understanding of Qin Mo, the other party had never been a person who could hold back. If Qin Mo really liked Fu Jiu, he wouldn't hold back just because he was a boy. Besides, everyone in their circle knew how straight Qin Mo was. When they were in high school, a playful boy wanted to find a girl for Qin Mo. That night, there was a boy in the private room who was prettier than a girl. But in the end, they parted on bad terms. Qin Mo didn't object, but he didn't like it either. So, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Jiangzhua felt much more relaxed as he thought about this. He couldn't deny that Qin Mo was really nice to Fu Jiu. But it was probably because he was a member of the Supreme Alliance. Since Qin Mo said that there wouldn't be anything, it meant that he knew what he was doing. For the National League. This brother of his was really attentive. Qin Mo was indeed attentive. The second visit was even more exaggerated than the first. He placed the gift boxes on the floor and said with a faint smile, I came in a hurry the first 2 times, so I didn't bring anything for Auntie. He Honghua looked at the gifts on the floor and poked her Jiu's back with her finger. Then she said to Qin Mo, Just come, why did you bring anything? I'm still cooking soup. You guys talk first. Seeing her mother leave happily, Fu Jiu said casually, Brother Mo, every time you come to my house, it seems like you bring a dowry. Dowry? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster who was drinking water and said slowly, Even if it's that kind of stuff, it's still a dowry. Hearing that, Fu Jiu almost choked. Brother Mo, I realize that you are more difficult to flirt with than when I first met you. What? Qin Mo lifted his good-looking eyebrows, and in an instant, his black-bellied aura spread out. Fu Jiu smiled faintly. Nothing. Come on, have some fruit first. He Honghua came out of the kitchen in an apron. Qin Mo said, Thank you. He looked noble and handsome. The more He Honghua looked at it, the more satisfied she was. If it wasn't for the fact that the Qin clan's conditions were too good, it was not bad to have such a son-in-law. No, no, no. What was she thinking? Qin Mo was too smart. It was naturally good to be friends. Lovers. Qin Mo probably didn't know she was a girl. In the future, all of this would be a lie, so it should be impossible for the two of them. The more He Honghua thought about it, the dimmer her eyes became. Her expression was no longer as happy as before. However, these thoughts were still hidden in her heart. When she finished all the dishes on the table and invited the 2 people on the sofa to eat, her face began to redden again. Before Fu Jiu could respond, He Honghua had already said, Qin Mo, Auntie thanks you for today's shareholder meeting. Shareholders meeting? Qin Mo held the wine glass in his hand and repeated the 4 words. He Honghua smiled and said, Yes, I've heard about it from my Joe. It's a good plan. You're really smart. Chapter 425. The voice sounded as if it was purposely ringing in her ears. She didn't need to think to know that the Almighty was waiting for her to settle the score. She suddenly felt that she should invite the Almighty to her house for dinner or something. What an incomparably huge pit. He Honghua was very happy. Which mother didn't want to hear someone compliment her child? The more she looked at him, the more she felt sorry for him. Throughout the meal, Qin Mo ate with dignity and elegance. His every move was like his temperament. He was like a prince. He Honghua finally understood what it meant to be born in a prestigious family. A man like this should be liked by many girls. No. Too many men that girls liked were unreliable. There were too many temptations out there. It seemed like they should just be friends. But Xiaodong had said, Qin Mo was the reason why her Jiu was addicted to games. Her Jiu wouldn't. He Honghua's eyes were filled with worry when she thought of this. She stood up and said, "Sit down, I'll get someone to brew some tea for you to digest." In fact, He Honghua didn't need to brew tea. She needed some time alone. He Honghua had never realized like today that her Jiu was already a big girl. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right decision back then. If she didn't want anything, her Jiu would be like any other girl now, able to fall in love with anyone without any scruples. But now, He Honghua didn't want to think about what she would have lost if she hadn't done that. She couldn't go back to her home in the countryside. All her money was invested in the Fu Corporation. He Honghua still hadn't forgotten the time when the doctor told her that her child had congenital asthma and had to be hospitalized. How she got through to that number. In a sense, He Honghua was even more loyal than the women in the city. She couldn't stand the fact that her man was with another man. The divorce papers had been written long ago. She used to be stubborn, thinking that she didn't want anything and would raise her Jiu by herself. It didn't matter if her life was tough. She still had a pair of hands. She could still be a nanny. The words congenital asthma made her think of Fu Zhongyi. Fu Zhongyi was impatient at first, but when he heard that Jiu was a boy, he immediately transferred the money. At that time, He Honghua knew that if she wanted her child to live a good life, she had to do this. Although He Honghua was from the countryside, she was a mother. She didn't want Fu Jiu to see her like this, so she didn't go out. This made it easier for the Almighty to interrogate someone. Now that I'm not here, you can talk about the shareholders' meeting slowly. Qin Mo sat on the sofa and looked at the youngster with deep eyes. His face was handsome. What scheme did I use? Fu Jiu knew that she couldn't escape this, so she simply explained the situation. You are lying. Qin Mo's voice was still calm. But Fu Jiu could still hear the disapproval in his voice. She smiled faintly. Sometimes, white lies are necessary. For example, the fact that she was a girl. It would not be good for anyone to say it out loud. As long as Madame Fu did not come back, she had to maintain this disguise. On one hand, it was a good move. On the other hand, it would prevent Fu Zhongyi from making a big deal out of this. But looking at the Almighty. Chapter 426. Fu Jiu's fingers paused at this thought. If the Almighty found out that she was hiding a lot of things from him, the consequences would not be good. Fu Jiu knew how smart Qin Mo was. She had said long ago that she did not want to be enemies with this person. However, it seemed like it would be up to the Almighty in the future whether they would become enemies or not. It wasn't that Fu Jiu hadn't thought about telling him that she was a girl. But in Tokyo, when she remembered that the Almighty was the mysterious person who had trapped her, she couldn't help but smile. Fu Jiu gave up on the idea. Furthermore, Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes. The Almighty didn't seem to like girls. Once the Almighty found out that she was a girl, she couldn't rule out the possibility that he would link her operation to Z's. Then she would be in danger. He couldn't reveal his identity. You have to dress. Only after everything was settled and they left this place would they be able to do so. Qin Mo's gaze swept over the youngster who had suddenly quietened down. He tilted his head and used the tone of an older brother. What? You don't even allow me to say it? The wall-jumping genius. Those last 4 words. Fu Jiu looked up, looking rather handsome. Brother Mo, Let's discuss something. Qin Mo lifted his eyes. What? Can you stop calling me a bookworm? Adding on the word, climbing over the wall. It was too vicious. Don't think that she couldn't tell. Qin Mo looked at the youngster's expression and curled his lips into a smile. He reached out his hand and flicked Fu Jiu's forehead. In a good mood, he said. No. The corner of Fu Jiu's mouth twitched. How could he be so unreasonable? Didn't he say that he would give in to his little brother? Qin Mo really liked to see the youngster's downcast expression, because he knew that he was the only one who could see the youngster's adorable expression. As for the girls, Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. After the incident with the Cali team, in the future, if anyone tried to get close to the youth, he would check carefully. Since it was his younger brother, of course, he had to protect him well. Women had too many thoughts. In the past, Qin Mo didn't think so. He wasn't sure if every elder brother who had a younger brother was like this. However, there was one thing that was common. No elder brother would wish for anyone with ulterior motives to get close to their younger brother. Qin Mo was the same. However, based on his current understanding of the youngster, it was impossible for him to win. This fellow's ability to cause harm and provoke others was top-notch. Thus he maintained his posture and added in a flat voice, "Since you're using me as a shield, you should at least give me some compensation." Brother Mo, we are brothers. Talking about compensation hurts our relationship. Fu Jiu raised her arm and moved closer to him. Qin Mo remained seated, his brows slightly arched as he pinched the youngster's chin. Put your paws down. If you dare to blow into my ear, I'll tell Auntie right now who came up with the plan at the shareholders' meeting. Qin Mo's brows furrowed slightly. Not easy to flirt with, really not easy to flirt with. The Almighty was evolving too quickly. In the past, the way he looked at her was like looking at a bag of trash. As soon as she got close to him, he would want to pack himself up and throw her out. Why were they immune to it now? Fu Jiu mumbled softly in Qin Mo's ear. Qin Mo didn't push the youngster away, allowing her to place her hand on his shoulder. Chapter 427. Suddenly, Qin Mo's eyes darkened uncontrollably. He turned his head and looked at the youngster. Fu Jiu didn't understand. She didn't blow into the Almighty's ear, so why was the Almighty giving her a warning look? Fu Jiu thought it was a warning. However, in He Honghua's eyes, such a scene was not the case. He Honghua was still holding the teacup. Her body trembled, and she almost threw the tea set away. In the end, she took a deep breath and retreated. Seeing that her Jiu and Qin Mo were fine, she found a chance to speak through the wall. "Jiu, come here, I have too many things here to take out," He Honghua shouted. Qin Mo retracted his gaze, and his voice was very calm. "Auntie is calling you. Hurry up. We can talk about the payment later." Fu Jiu. The Almighty was indeed a cunning businessman. If she had known earlier, she would have thought of another reason. She didn't expect her mother to do this. Fu Jiu sighed in her heart. When she stood up again, she was already indolent. She would deal with whatever came her way. She could owe the Almighty for the payment. She was too young. This was the best thing Fu Jiu had done since her rebirth. Every time the Almighty said he would teach her a lesson, he wouldn't go overboard. After all, the Almighty also said that he would give in to his little brother. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu's thin lips curled into a smile. Strangely, there was nothing to take from the kitchen. He Honghua looked at the youngster who walked in with one hand in his pocket. She pulled her Jiu to the side. "Jiu, what's going on between you and Qin Mo?" Fu Jiu understood instantly. It was just an excuse to go into the kitchen to take things. Her mother wanted to whisper to her, but He Honghua was too anxious. Before Fu Jiu could reply, she said her second sentence with a heavy heart. "I heard from Xiaodong that you play games because of Qin Mo Jiu, is that true?" Her second sentence came out with a heavy heart. Fu Jiu didn't know how to answer this question. If she started playing games to earn money, destroy that mistress, and take back the Fu family, then she wouldn't be able to explain the shareholders' meeting today. Fu Jiu was a person who didn't like to lie. This was because once a lie was made, it had to rely on many lies to cover it up. However, she had to avoid anything that would make He Honghua suspicious of her. Some things, if known, would only add to one's sorrow. However, Fujio didn't intend to continue lying. She chuckled and did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Mom, why do you suddenly want to ask me this?" "I'm afraid." Honghua raised her voice and then lowered it again. But even so, it attracted Qin Mo's attention from the sofa. He stood up without the two of them knowing, thinking that Fujio couldn't carry everything by herself. Honghua continued to whisper, "I'm just afraid that you'll fall in love with him. You're all grown up now, and you might not be able to control your feelings." "I understand that. But I have something to tell you. The Qin family's standards are too high. Wait until I earn enough money to be on par with them. If you think about this again, I'm afraid that you'll get hurt." Fujio laughed. "Mom, what are you thinking? Brother Mo and I are just good friends." "Really?" Honghua's eyes lit up. "You don't like him?" Fujio answered subconsciously, "No." Chapter 428. As smart as Fujio was, she quickly realized something. Her heart skipped a beat. There was only one word. It was over. She turned around and her eyes met the Almighty's. His eyes were a little cold, but there was more depth and something Fujio couldn't see through. She didn't know how long the Almighty had been here. He just looked at her with his hands in his pockets. It seemed like he had heard the conversation between her and her mother. This situation was really awkward. After all, no friend was willing to be a guest. She heard her mother ask her son if he liked that guy. It didn't match his gender. Besides, the Almighty was so straight. He probably couldn't accept such a joke. But that wasn't the most important thing. If the Almighty didn't hear it, her "I don't like him" would be too hurtful. Fujio was worried that the Almighty would misunderstand, so she explained, "Brother Mo, my mother said that I like you, not friends. Don't misunderstand. I'm just proving that I don't have any improper thoughts about you." "Really?" Qin Mo's voice didn't show any emotion. He was always cold and dignified, like the cool grass on a hazy day. Fujio nodded, and to prove that she wasn't lying, she added, "Of course, if it was between friends, how could I say that I don't like him?" Qin Mo smiled, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. It was just that the subtle feeling was hidden too deep. To prevent Honghua from being too embarrassed, he pulled the youngster over. "Since there's nothing for you to do here, send me out." Fujio raised her eyebrows. "Not going to drink tea?" Qin Mo's handsome face was dignified. "There's a meeting tomorrow morning." "Okay." Fujio also felt that the current situation wasn't suitable for further discussion. It would be better to sleep tomorrow and forget about the awkwardness. Qin Mo was indeed well educated. Even when he was leaving, he didn't forget to say goodbye to Honghua. From the Fu family's villa to the main gate, the two didn't speak on the way. But when Qin Mo sat in the car, he could still see the silver-haired youngster standing outside the window with a hint of coldness in his eyes. The pure black Hummer wasn't slow. Soon, Qin Mo entered the military compound. A call came from Feng Yi, saying that the incident on the internet was a blessing in disguise. Now, there were more people supporting Supreme Alliance. It's all thanks to Yao Yao for being the first one to stand up and send voice support. Sometimes, even doing good deeds requires a leader. Little Spade's kindness to this girl wasn't in vain. If it wasn't for their appearances, I would have thought they were dating. The Weibo group was filled with Supreme Alliance's hot comments, and even the media made the following comments. Supreme Alliance isn't just passionate about esports, it's also about the relationship between them. Youth doesn't care about winning or losing, it's about who's with you. Qin Mo listened to Feng Yi's words. He pulled open his collar with one hand and tilted his head to light a cigarette. His arm was casually placed on the sofa, his fingers playing with the limited edition silver Zippo lighter. His dark black hair was a little messy. In fact, he was a little absent-minded. He didn't even listen to Feng Yi's words carefully. The reason for this was that the conversation was still lingering in his mind. "Mom, what are you thinking? Brother Mo and I are just good friends." "Really? You don't like him?" Chapter 429. You don't like it? Qin Mo couldn't help but frown. Somehow, his eyes turned cold. But the youngster wasn't wrong. The two of them were friends. Nothing else. Both he and the youngster thought so. But Qin Mo suddenly realized that he didn't like the tone the youngster used when he talked about him. He only treated him as an ordinary friend. Because in his heart that guy was special. Of course, he would pamper his little brother a lot. People were like that. They treated others as important and hoped that person would give them the same thing. Special treatment and attention. All this time, he thought he got it. The youngster's special treatment. After all, the youngster was always different in front of him than in front of others. But now, Qin Mo felt that he seemed to have misunderstood. Just like what Feng Yi said on the phone. The youngster treated everyone very well. That seemed to be his quality. Maybe under circumstances where he didn't know. The youngster would show more expressions in front of Shui Yaoyao. After all, he had seen how the youngster protected Shui Yaoyao. This realization made Qin Mo feel a little unreconciled. Even at this moment, he was still expressionless and handsome. But his heart was far from being so calm. It was hard to accept. Qin Mo's slender fingers flicked the cigarette butt. A strand of black hair fell down, adding a sense of danger to his sense of abstinence. His face hidden in the darkness, no emotions could be seen. But that posture seemed to make people feel a little lonely for no reason. Outside the window, the night was getting darker. In the fog, the French window reflected the lights of the whole city, the man's slender figure, like a vampire aristocrat, mysteriously saying something. The next day. There was only one day left before the National League. People who didn't play esports couldn't understand that kind of excitement. The overwhelming publicity was not only on the computer, but also on the Hero mobile app. As long as one logged in, they could see the 24-hour countdown for the National League. The battle order was out. The official Weibo account was bustling with activity. But Shui Yaoyao was calm. The older generation didn't understand esports. In their eyes, it was asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yo, you're going out again? An auntie who was sitting in the yard picking vegetables saw Shui Yaoyao come out and pouted. Yaoyao, we're a family. What we said was for your own good. You should think about it. It's not good to keep doing this, right? Shui Yaoyao didn't say anything. She had asked around when she was wearing the Supreme Alliance's uniform. She didn't want to hear this. I know you don't like what I say, but I have no choice. Someone has to talk to you. Your mom is a newlywed, and I heard that the one she married isn't bad. I don't know the details, but if you want to be considerate of your mom, you should know your place. Maybe one day your mom will get a refund. Otherwise, why would she leave you here alone? It must be that the family can't accept you. If you ask me, your mom is quite a troublemaker. She's already so old, but why can't she stand the loneliness? That's the attitude again. You know the condition of your family, don't daydream all the time. I know you don't like what I say, but I have no choice. Chapter 430. Hey! That auntie couldn't take it anymore and shouted, My neighbors, come and see what kind of child she is. How can she talk like that? It's okay that she's fat, but I tried to persuade her, but she was so rude and unreasonable. Dream. Playing games is considered a dream? As soon as she said that, some people started to support her and craned their necks to look over. The eldest daughter of the Shui family is really getting worse and worse. I know, Mom. She used to volunteer to help our school's senior Jiang with his homework, and she fantasized about doing something with him. In the end, he was still scared away by her. She didn't even look at herself and dared to dream about others. It's the same now. She fantasizes about how good she is at playing games all day. Don't worry about her. How can a person like her have any future? Listening to the voices of discussion coming from all directions, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. Shui Yaoyao tightened her grip on the strap of her bag and didn't look back. She just wanted to stick to what she wanted. No matter what others said. She didn't care if she had any future. She had to go back to the national competition. Because only after the national competition, no one would say that it was just a dream. 10:45 p.m. Qin Group Building. Feng Yi kept raising his hand to look at the time on his watch. Why isn't she here yet? Obviously, he was a little anxious. because they had to get to Lin City before 5 p.m. to participate in the regional registration. Otherwise, the neighborhood committee of the national competition would deem them as giving up automatically. Actually, the time didn't matter. But the reason why they didn't enter the top 4 last year. It was because of the day of the regional registration. When Almighty Qin appeared, there was still blood on his fingers. That was why Feng Yi had such a big reaction. Moreover, a girl didn't come this time. Feng Yi was even more worried. He stood there and paced back and forth. The other members were all on the commercial bus, including Qin Mo. But it was obvious that everyone in the team noticed that their captain seemed to be a little different today. But what exactly was different? They couldn't figure it out at the moment. The main reason was probably because Shui Yaoyao didn't appear, which distracted their attention. Especially Fu Jiu. She was still wearing a pure black anti-smog mask and looked out of the car window. When she saw Feng Yi raise his hand to look at his watch, she pulled her finger and jumped out of the car. She smiled and said lightly, "CEO Feng, you guys go first. I'll go find her. After that, I'll meet you in Lin City. She should be caught up with something. According to Yao Yao's personality, she won't be so unpunctual." Feng Yi thought about it. Let's wait for another 3 minutes. If she isn't here in 3 minutes, we need all the team members to be here. Otherwise, Qin Mo wouldn't have missed the best treatment time. Fu Jiu could hear the importance of this matter from Feng Yi's mouth. With one hand in her pocket, her eyes couldn't help but sink. Qin Mo, who was sitting in the car, looked at the youngster's side profile through the window. Qin Mo's expression didn't change at all, as if there was nothing in his eyes. But upon closer inspection, Qin Mo's eyes had never left the youngster since Fu Jiu got out of the car. That kind of deep and indifferent gaze and that kind of indifferent and noble sitting posture. Chapter 431. Just when Qin Mo was about to retract his attention, the youngster's eyes had a very obvious change. That kind of surprise couldn't be deceived. It was as if something like fireworks were blooming in his eyes. He was full of energy and was very handsome. He saw with his own eyes that the youngster took a step forward and held on to the person who came. Just like that, Shui Yaoyao's figure also came into view. Sorry, something happened on the way. Shui Yaoyao's hair was messy because when she walked forward, someone actually tried to hold her back. That auntie was really weird. She insisted on being reasonable, or she wouldn't let her go. Shui Yaoyao was in a hurry, so she was panting and didn't notice that there was a cut on her face. It looked like it was made by a fingernail. Fu Jiu had one hand in her pocket, and the other hand touched her face. Shui Yaoyao dodged in pain. Suddenly, Fu Jiu's eyes turned a little dark, and she gave people a much more dangerous feeling. But she didn't show it too much. Instead she said faintly, "Get in the car first, we'll talk." Okay. Shui Yaoyao didn't think it was a big deal, as long as she made it in time. But she didn't know that in Qin Mo's eyes, this scene had slowed down a lot. Just like what he thought yesterday. He had always thought that he was the most special to the youngster. But now it seemed he wasn't the only one who could affect the youngster's emotions. Something seemed to be pressing down on his chest, forcing him to close his eyes. Coco's feeling was the most obvious. Captain's low pressure seemed to be accompanied by cold air. And had he regained his status as the Supreme Alliance's most beloved? Otherwise, why would the captain agree to let him sit next to him today? And not with Spade Z? Coco secretly looked at his captain's side profile. Some people were like this. It was clearly the same uniform. When he wore it, girls would say, "So cute, I want to take him home and raise him." When he wore it, he looked like a noble from a comic book. But the coldness was too strong. He wanted to swap seats with Spade Z. Spade Z wasn't afraid of the captain anyway. But when he thought of this, the best time had passed. The car started. Fu Jiu and Shui Yaoyao sat together. "The wound on your face? What happened?" Fu Jiu glanced at her phone, and her eyes darkened. Shui Yaoyao knew that the young man was concerned about her, so she smiled and shook her head. Ever since the internet incident, Shui Yaoyao understood that because of Spade Z's rapid rise to fame, the youngster was bound to be under extraordinary pressure. It wasn't that easy. She didn't want to trouble him with her matters. He wasn't being polite. Instead, She had to learn to handle her own affairs. In this way, she would be able to help His Highness Jiao. How could someone as smart as Fu Jiao not know what this silly girl was thinking? She said, "Okay." He raised his hand and poked her soft face with a smile. His face was gentle and his voice was pleasant. "Tell me when you want to say it." In fact, the conversation between the two of them wasn't loud at all. In fact, it was very soft. But in Qin Mo's ears, the sound seemed to have been amplified many times and there was even an echo. Chapter 432. Coco's body stiffened. He shouldn't mention anything about changing seats. Captain's gaze was as though he wanted to kill Spade Z. How did a certain someone provoke the captain? Coco tried his best to reduce his presence while looking back and forth. In the end, he didn't even dare to sleep, biting the rabbit's ear with his teeth. He felt like Captain was going to turn black. What should he do? In fact, Qin Mo didn't do anything. Compared to when he first met the youngster, he did whatever he wanted. Qin Mo's emotions now were completely different from before. He even had the urge to throw a tantrum. "Since I'm not special to you, then you're not that special in front of me, right?" But when he thought about it, he would remember the youngster's appearance in Tokyo because of him. That fierceness in protecting him was pleasing to the eye no matter how he looked at it. But why couldn't he be the most special one? Qin Mo didn't realize the situation he was in at all. This situation made him realize that not everything in this world could be planned out by him. Even if he closed his eyes, the image of the youngster rubbing the girl's head seemed to be swaying in front of him. That image was indeed dazzling. Fu Jiao was also looking at the Almighty. In fact, after yesterday's awkwardness, she had been looking for a chance to talk to the Almighty again. But as soon as they got in the car, the Almighty was already sitting next to Coco. Fu Jiao paused for a moment. She was smart enough to realize that now was not a good time to talk. Wait until they reached the hotel. With this thought in mind, after more than 3 hours of driving, they finally arrived at Linqing. As the provincial capital, it was the registration point for the national competition. Many famous teams could be seen here. There were also reporters and media who were already stationed there. That kind of scene, with the esports competition banner and cosplay actors standing outside, made people feel hot. It was the first time Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang came to this place. Besides being shocked, even their fingertips were a little numb. Was this the national competition? So this was what the national competition looked like. Games were always inseparable from online voice actors. When the deep and pleasant voice sounded, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang felt as if they were in the scene of Hero. It was very dreamy. That voice is... Feng Shang stuttered. All the lines spoken by his character in the game were recorded by this person. Feng Yi chuckled at the side. Don't joke around. That person is a god-level voice actor with a lot of fans. While they're still here, hurry and enter the venue. If anyone sees young Master Qin, I'll have to act as a temporary security guard. The Almighty's popularity was undoubtedly the highest among them. At this point it had nothing to do with skill. It was all about looks. He was different from Feng Shang. The other members of the Supreme Alliance had been here more than once. But every time it was filled with regret. For example, Lin Feng and Yun Hu. Esports did depend on one's age in some aspects. They were playing well now, but they didn't know what would happen next year. Moreover, everyone in the Supreme Alliance knew that their captain couldn't stay in the team forever. After all, he was the president of the Qin Group. This year was undoubtedly their last chance. Chapter 433. There was a special hall in the building to welcome every participating team. Hence, the people inside weren't as good as the people outside. When the Supreme Alliance members walked in, some people couldn't help but turn back. However, they weren't looking at Supreme Alliance. They were looking at Qin Mo. Supreme Alliance wasn't weak, but compared to the Supreme Alliance team, Qin Mo, who had suppressed Xiangnan's captain, was the most interesting. The most valuable esports player. This was the title that almost everyone hoped to obtain. But Supreme Alliance wasn't the national champion team. But the title of the most valuable esports player landed on Qin Mo. In fact, Even Feng Yi was shocked. Back then, when the news was announced, he had revealed a look of disbelief. How good was a player to be able to be the most valuable esports player? Was it just based on the number of kills? No. It wasn't just that. The most valuable esports player not only had good skills but also the ability to lead the team. Many people said that it could raise the team's ability to a higher level. That was something only Qin Mo could do. Hence, when he entered, many people were sizing him up and whispering among themselves. Did you see that? That's Qin Mo, the person with the most MVP awards. That was in the past. It might not be the case now. Last year, Supreme Alliance didn't even win the preliminaries. Ever since that time, Qin Mo rarely came out to do publicity. Recently, I've only heard of him playing in the wilderness. Could it be that his ability has declined? He doesn't dare to show his face? It's possible. It's also possible that his hand injury hasn't healed yet. But no matter what, it won't be that easy for him to win this year's MVP. Don't forget that there's a god in the regionals. Once they entered, they could smell the intense smell of gunpowder. This was a situation that could be encountered in other large-scale competitions besides the esports arena. As the Supreme Alliance took their seats, the atmosphere in the stadium seemed to heat up again. Even the shoutcaster paused when he saw Qin Mo very quickly. He resumed his deep voice. Teams that haven't confirmed their registration will be represented by their captains. Come here and fill out the form. Teams that have confirmed their registration, stay where you are. In such an occasion, order was important. However, there were more than 10 captains who went over to fill in the form. Every captain's aura was forcefully suppressed by Qin Mo. The commentator looked at the form in his hand and adjusted the microphone's position. Now let's welcome the champions of last year's regional competition, which is also the top 4 in the country, the Yunzhong team, to read out the rules of the competition. Let's welcome them with a round of applause. That was the form. Fujiu sat in her seat. She felt like the school leaders were giving a speech, and the students were sitting down and listening. Playing with the phone in his hand, he was still thinking about how to talk to the god later. However, he didn't expect his elbow to be hit by someone. Moreover, from the strength of that blow, it was definitely intentional. Fujiu looked back and saw a team walking over. She had seen the leader of the team before. When she first bought a mouse, it was this person who stood up for Fu Ximing. Chapter 434. Fujiu ignored him and was very indifferent. It was probably because of this attitude that the opposing team members sneered. That person still had a lazy look on his face. After saying that, he continued to walk forward. The last member of the Yunzhong team was not someone else. It was Fu Ximing, who had a good relationship with the members of the Yunzhong team. When he passed by Fujiu, there was arrogance in his eyes, as if he was saying, "So what if you entered the Supreme Alliance?" The champion of the regional competition is not the Supreme Alliance, but the Lincheng Yunzhong team. The reason why Fu Ximing appeared like this was to tell this bumpkin not to think that he was really different from before just because he had some skills and seized his uncle's shares. This was nothing. In the esports selection contest, the reason why he lost to this bumpkin was that his teammates were not good enough. Now it was different. Lincheng Yunzhong, the top 4 in the country. Even the Supreme Alliance with young Master Qin might not be able to resist them. After all, young Master Qin's hand was injured. Coupled with the secret training during this period of time, they had developed a set of countermeasures for Spade Z's playing style. No matter how good Spade Z was, he was only good at killing people. Once it was a team competition, the 3 of them could surround him. This was Fu Ximing's idea. And the captain of the Yunzhong team, Ling Xiao, had a playful look on his face. He really didn't realize that the youngster who had some feelings for him before was really different from before. That gay from before would blush whenever he saw him. It was very obvious. The Ling family and the Fu family were business partners. At that time, he wanted to play with the other party. He didn't expect that person to be so smart. Whatever he asked him to do, that trash would do it. It was only fun to play with him for a day or two. He didn't like men, and he wouldn't touch that guy. He just simply enjoyed that kind of gaze. After a long time, he would also feel disgusted. Naturally, he looked down on Fujiu. But Ling Xiao was very interested in Spade Z from the beginning, and he even thought of ways to find this person to let him join the Yunzhong team. Since he knew that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, Ling Xiao found it interesting. It seemed that he had to pick up the old toy and play with it again. With this thought in mind, Ling Xiao led the 8 official members of the Yunzhong squad to the center of the auditorium. That was an honor only given to the regional champion. The members of the Yunzhong battle team weren't short either. After all, they were a battle team that purely aimed to make profits. Of course, they would pay more attention to this when it came to selecting members. Therefore, when they stood there was indeed a considerable effect. It seems like Yunzhong's momentum is also very strong this year. That's right. You didn't know last year, but we were almost beaten up by them. He wasn't there for the battle between Yunzhong and Supreme Alliance, right? It's probably useless. With his hands injured, he won't be able to defeat Ling Xiao. When the whispers started, the members of the Yunzhong battle team began to read the rules one by one. In order to record this scene, even the cameras were all aimed at the members of the Yunzhong battle team. The members of the Yunzhong team gave off the feeling that they were standing at the top. In fact, they really felt that they were at the top. Chapter 435. Once people stood in a high position, they would become arrogant. The Yunzhong team was the best example. After the registration, the organizing committee took the form and went to the top floor. All the major teams would return to the hotel to rest so that they could be in the best condition for tomorrow's competition. But when the Supreme Alliance stood up, they happened to come face to face with the Yunzhong team. They met on a narrow path. The atmosphere in the venue changed. The people from the other battle teams looked at this scene with different expressions. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down. Everyone seemed to be looking at Lin Xiao and Qin Mo's side profile. Their eyes looked back and forth between the two captains, as if they were evaluating who was better. One path, 2 teams, and no one had the intention to give way. The difference was that the Yunzhong team's members had obvious pride on their faces. The Supreme Alliance's members were no different from usual. The reporter looked at the scene in the camera and couldn't help but say to himself, "So handsome." Indeed handsome. Let's not talk about whether the Supreme Alliance's skills were better than the Yunzhong team. Just from the looks alone, the Supreme Alliance was like a concentration camp for handsome men. Qin Mo and Fu Jiu didn't need to be mentioned. Both of them had the makings of an idol superstar. Their nobility was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Looking at Lin Feng and Yun Hu, the former was praised more than the girls in some teams. The latter came from a military compound, with a tall and strong body. Yin Wuyao had a cigarette in his mouth. His nose bridge was high, and he had the handsome face of a middle-aged uncle. Coco was holding a plush rabbit in his hands. Standing next to Feng Shang, who had the same temperament, he was so youthful that he could make a bunch of anti-fans scream. These people were all wearing the same uniform, led by Qin Mo. In terms of appearance, they had already surpassed the Yunzhong team. Or maybe it was because of this. The members of the Yunzhong team didn't like the Supreme Alliance. They were the champions of the regional competition, so why did Supreme Alliance receive more attention than them? This dissatisfaction became more and more obvious as the two teams brushed past each other. Especially when a tall man touched Lin Feng's shoulder, he sneered and spat out, "Loser." Qin Mo wasn't there that year. Yun Hu was the temporary captain. During the team competition, because of Lin Feng's loss, they didn't make it to the top 4 of the National League. This matter had always been a thorn in Lin Feng's heart. The person who spoke was the player who had killed Lin Feng back then. Lin Feng stopped in his tracks. The player and the teammate next to him laughed. "Angry? Don't be angry yet. The competition hasn't started yet. You'll be even angrier tomorrow." That laughter was filled with obvious mockery. A clash between two teams full of gunpowder like this would definitely be a headline. Coupled with the current situation, there was no way the cameras would leave. Because all the members of the Supreme Alliance stopped in their tracks when they heard the laughter. The tall player from the Yunzhong team was still smiling at Lin Feng. "Go back and practice some more. Don't let it end up like last time. You died before I could even unleash my full strength. There's no meaning in winning too quickly." Lin Feng didn't say anything. He knew that he was hot-tempered. He was afraid that if he said anything, he would pounce on him and scratch him to death. The contestant clearly understood his personality and was about to say something. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.